High frequency. Yeah. Sync up. Already. Yay. I get up with the frequency each and every morning. Thanks, practice gratitude, commence brainstorming. Live, awake, excited, new day, new me. PSA, courtesy of JRE and Scott Free. Too many folks shallow, scared to drown in the deep end. And I ain't pointing fingers, best believe I was one of them. The pain I was numbing it, self-inflicted punishment. The streets I was running in led me to consciousness. Yes, they can steal my flows, but can't block my shine, baby. You see my glow? Now I live in the light, radiating love. Sun, you're a star, as below, so above. Am I too metaphysical? Are you over analytical? So many situations get critical. I'm a warrior, survivor is an understatement. Started subterranean, now we in the cosmos on some milky wavy shit. Sun-kissed, melanin rich, health is wealth, we live abundant. Connected with the oneness, I'm off my dumb shit. I bring to you substance more specific, life is synchronistic. All is energy, fact, over fiction when I rap. That high frequency, yeah, we on that. Sync with the most divine, catch contact, physicality beyond that. High frequency, we on that. Mind over matter, thoughts not scattered. Both stars co-creating, spiral up, no latitude. Heaven or hell, and you leave a trail. The high and low polarities, the vibrations, they all real.
Day to day just hoping, going through the motions, staring at the doors, who could ever get this open? Till I uncovered the secret to keeping it real. I got in touch with my soul, the fan my frequency feel. We play and follow the leader ain't going nowhere. That's why I'm living my life with a sovereign mind. All I want in this world is to spread love and greatness to you, using my music for we out of time. So for the divine, I'm doing my due diligence, giving some peace to views that's too militant. Doing it different, I got purpose and position. Feel the vibration, transmission is the mission. Need you to listen to these words, my dude. I swear my third eye got a bird's eye view. And do you wanna sync up? Cause I do. Surfing this wave, follow as we ride through.
All is energy, fact, over fiction when I rap. That high frequency, yeah, we on that. Sync with the most divine, catch contact, physicality beyond that. High frequency, we on that. Mind over matter, thoughts not scattered. Co-stars co-creating, spiral up, no latitude. Heaven or hell, it's in you, leave a trail. The high and low polarities, the vibrations, they all real.
Let it marinate, cause this is very great. To every state, the burden on my back, well, I carry weight. High frequency, high power, free spirit. Talking to the man upstairs, and yeah, he hear it. Man, I'm riding the wave, inspired by the days when we sparked up, that was the light of the haze. But now I'm synced up, yeah, my drink's up. Am I drinking again? Well, you know, yeah, the gig's up. Freedom ain't free, believe them, they not me. The oppressor knows my melanin rich, and I'm scot-free. That means I got away. BS, not today. Stop and say we good, okay, no more drops today. This the high frequency, they gon' feel this. Still with optimism, but still I'm the realist. They gon' feel this, yeah, real quick. Bring the chorus in, that's real shit.
All is energy, fact, over fiction when I rap. That high frequency, yeah, we on that. Sync with the most divine, catch contact, physicality beyond that. High frequency, we on that. Mind over matter, thoughts not scattered. Co-stars co-creating, spiral up, no latitude. Heaven or hell, it's in you, leave a trail. The high and low polarities, the vibrations, they all real. Peace to the gods, brother Yusuf found. High frequency radio, yeah, we on that. Peace, brother Paul Savage, you already know. You were locked in, tuned in live. High frequency radio. Sync up.
You're listening to Mobile Oasis with your host, Taj Tarik Bey. Exclusively on High Frequency Radio Network, the baddest radio network on the planet.
Islam, Reawakening, peace on earth and goodwill to all men. This is Mobile Oasis on High Frequency Radio. The High Frequency Radio call-in number is 424-222-5250. That is 424-222-5250. And I'm Taj Tarik Bey, your host for Mobile Oasis. And I'm honored to be here with you today on High Frequency Radio, a humanitarian and informative communications venue. I will be hosting this show for your honor, for your respect, and for your considerations from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock p.m. in the afternoon. This day or degree is Thursday, known in Moorish Latin as Jueves, being the 5th day of the week, and ruled by the planet Jupiter. The holy name for this degree, or Ilo, is Sakail. And as the schedule may allow, I trust to be with you on Thursdays to come. Recognizing the unity of life, we thank you and honor you for sharing your time with us, and trust that our sharing, will and communications will manifest as nurturing remedial dispensations, bringing forth some greater good and functionality. And as we appeal to the higher principles within ourselves to help as an ancillary in the great universal humanitarian movement, we trust that you will do the same, promoting and supporting the works needed and necessary in helping to uplift fallen humanity. And with that being said, we encourage you to bring the best that your heart has to offer. And let us sit down at the round table and with good intent get some work done. And we greet you in peace here on High Frequency Radio. I'd like to share with you some congressional documents. We have talked in the past about House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session, June the 5th of 1933, dealing with the U.S. bankruptcy. Keep in mind when that is brought up in any conversations or when any so-called operatives doing business as the United States of America, etc., it must be clearly understood by everyone that you're not speaking to persons of a country. You're speaking to persons of a private, for-profit, corporate entity distinguished from an alien to the legitimized republic as stated and as established via the American Constitution set at Article 4, Section 4. Now, concerning the bankruptcy of the United States, this is very important, and take some notes, etc., and do some research hereafter so that much of this information that's shared with you on High Frequency Radio makes more practical sense to you, and that the information that's shared can be more useful to you. And as far as reference points are concerned, you can back up your positions in relationship to your interfacings and your interchanging with these persons, these alien persons who have been acting as imposters in government and exercising authorities and powers absolutely not vested in them. Now, there are worse things that we can expect if we don't wake up and demand some accountability from those persons alleging to be public servants in government. Now, keep in mind, don't say the government, don't say the positive article, because they are not the government. Those persons who are operating in all of the corporate states across the United States are essentially enemies of the United States. And this is the basis upon which they've been operating and abusing the people. And I was appreciating the information that Brother Paul Savage shared with us earlier on his show. And keep in mind, the very actions and the attitudes displayed by these persons is indicative of their knowing that they are not only dishonorable, but they are actually criminal. And like Paul said, what we should be doing every time we interface with them is reporting the crimes committed by them, and not necessarily just arguing with them trying to get due process, because they're not about due process, they're not about law, they're about criminality and robbing the people, etc. So to expect anything positive from them is sort of like naive. Now, the fact of the matter is the United States did go bankrupt in 1933. Although that's really not the first time, we'll just deal with this in relationship to their documented records. And so the United States was declared by the President Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, by Executive Orders 6073. Write that down. These are the executive orders that were issued by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. 6073. Another one, 6102. Another one, 6111. And Executive Order 6260. And that was issued on March the 9th of 1933 under the Trading with the Enemy Act of October the 6th of 1917. Put it in context. When they unlawfully and with sound and organized conspired corruption transferred the powers of the Congress of the United States Republic to the Board of Governors of the private for-profit human trafficking order of the governors of the Federal Reserve, private corporation for human trafficking, and for printing counterfeit. This is a knowing act. It was not done without any misleading or misrepresented information. They knew exactly what they were doing. And this is one of the major foundations upon which they have been operating to the injury of the people on a consistent basis, and logically, because they are operating in a thorough corrupted order, there is no venue that they have structured for justice because their operation is actually anti-justice. So it's in our interest, logically, to seek justice, understand their operations is to counter justice. Their operations is to counter the Republic's Constitution. And so when any processes or communications are taking place between the common people and these corporate persons doing business as the United States Corporation Company, entity, ETC, and its subordinate states of corporate entities distinguished from state republics, that must be always clear to everyone. Make it very clear in your mind that the state of Pennsylvania is not Pennsylvania Commonwealth as established under the American Constitution. There are two different venues, two different entities, etc. Pennsylvania Commonwealth has a legitimate constitution. State of Pennsylvania is a rogue order of criminals whose mission it is and was and continues to be to overthrow the Republican forms of government. This is why the barristers of England through the Bar Association have been consistently violating the people and constructing through symboliography instruments and processes by which they artfully rob the people, and instead of serving the people as public servants, they've actually been trafficking the people. And this, whether you're looking at the marriage certificate set forth by the DAR or the birth certificate bottomry instrument or the original manufacturer's titles of origin that is leaned against all vehicles, etc., all conveyances, etc., cars, trucks, automobiles, motorcycles, etc. And it is upon these frauds that they've been creating what is called colorable ens legis, or colorable legislation, to continue to rob the people and to find the people in relationship to finances and their liberties, etc., for exercising rights that are essentially rooted in divine law and are essentially unalienable rights, etc. And so the operations of the U.S. corporation company, distinguished from the United States Republic, is a feudal order, the U.S. democracy order, distinguished from the allodial nature of the republic. They are actually opposites. And so when people are interfacing with these persons claiming to be government, understand that they are well aware that they're exercising or entertaining criminal operations at all times. One of the things that I think very often occurs with the common people is that they're not aware of that fact. This is, again, why we share information on high-frequency radio, to try to aid and assist people to come out from under the iron hand oppression of the pale-skinned nations of Europe under the guise of their U.S. democracy order and Inquisition operations under the doctrine which is used operatively to run all agencies, all subordinate agencies and agents and persons, etc. And they use their doctrine of discovery as a manual of operations. Now, because many of the people, particularly the Aboriginal, indigenous people of the land, many of them are not aware of that. They have a tendency to formulate in their minds false expectations, etc. I also want to make a comment on the ritual Constantinian sacrifices that they make on the streets with young Asiatic males whom they have branded black and Latinos, etc. Understand, one of the most expensive drugs that is shared amongst the hierarchy in the U.S. democracy order is an elixir which they make from the pineal gland, which they steal from the bodies of the young males, etc., that they sacrifice on the street. Also, they sell the organs, etc. And so when people look at the sacrifices of humans that they make on the street and assume that they're just oversights or mistakes, etc., understand that they get kickbacks for the organs, etc., and all of the policemen who are really members of the gang of New York, which by secret agreement has spread across the country, etc., and are actually contract enforcers for the private corporations. They are not lawmen. They are not enforcers of law. They're actually highwaymen, and these principles and facts are documented. And so the people must have a cognate comprehension and understanding of whom they're dealing with, and make no assumptions that these people are your friends. They are not. They are contract enforcers for private corporations, and part of their operations of murder on the street through their gangs of New York is the selling of organs, etc., and protected under their doctrine of discovery, which the Magi, administrators of the human trafficking venues that they have been falsely calling courts, etc., are operative conspirators for the popes of Rome through and via their doctrine of discovery. This is the reason why there's rarely, very rarely, any processes by which persons who commit these heinous criminal acts against humanity, why they're not punished in any reasonable manner. And the people need to know that the administrators sitting behind the tribunals, which are not courts, they're private tribunals for profit. Also, for those who doubt what I just said, They should do some research on the Clearfield Doctrine to understand that these are private, for-profit, corporate entities and not government at all. And so that people don't develop or formulate in their mind that these people are in any manner, on any front, under any condition, legitimate. They are not. It's unfortunate, yes. It's criminal, yes. It's unfair, yes. Anti-justice, yes. But it's still, and in fact, what it is. And so they're operating on the Trading with the Enemy Act of October the 6th of 1917, which they enacted. That's in harmony with their establishment of converting the powers of the Congress to the governors of the Board of Governors for the Federal Reserve, etc., private corporate entity, etc. This is the foundation, understand, of their confidence in getting away with the criminal acts that they're committing on the street. And they're also counting on the fact that many and most of the so-called paid-off leaders will not expose that fact, which we just presented, to their alluring followers, etc. And most of them have or possess a 501c3 skull and bones agreement to get kickbacks from the corporate states distinguished from the state's republic, ATC, in order to maintain misinformation and misconcepts amongst their alluring followers. And this is one of the major bases of frustration with the people, because they have one expectation and, of course, receive only injury, distress, destruction, stacking jail, private for-profit jails, under penance, under the doctrine of discovery. And so it must be understood that the people are not dealing with legitimate government, and that must be always kept in mind in every process and every interchange and every interfacing that takes place between the Aboriginal people of the planet and of the land, America, Morocco, and the foreign for-profit occupying colonial Europeans who have been pretending to be legitimate government and exercising their doctrine of discovery. Now, with the U.S. Congress compromised, and they confirmed the bankruptcy on June the 5th of 1933, and thereupon they impaired all the obligations and considerations of contracts through their joint resolution to suspend the gold standard, which is rooted in the American Constitution, and to abrogate the gold clause on June the 5th of 1933. And, of course, as reference, you will see House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress, first session. Now, when the private for-profit tribunals and their personnel who are impersonating courts were called upon to rule on various of the provisions designed to implement and to complement Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Emergency Banking Relief Act of March the 9th, 1933, they were all found unconstitutional. And so what Franklin Delano Roosevelt did was go back to the courts and stack the courts with his chosen obsequious members of the bench or the Bar Association, and then sent many of the cases back through and reversed the rulings. And so under a color of law, they actually reversed the rulings that found their actions unconstitutional, and they did that under graft, under intimidation, under fraud processes, etc., proving themselves indeed to be enemies of the state. Now, House Joint Resolution 192, 48 Statute 112 was passed under a color of law by the U.S. Congress members on June the 5th of 1933. Now, that particular act committed by them impaired the obligations and the considerations of contracts and declared that the notes, the private for-profit commercial paper notes issued by the foreign for-profit Federal Reserve banks were legal tender for the payment of both public and private debts, and that the said payments in gold coin was against quote-unquote public policy. I repeat, they declared that the payment in gold coin, as required by the American Constitution, was against public policy. And in effect, Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the compromised U.S. Congress, under executive orders and legislative fiat, nationalized the people's money, i.e. their gold coin. Now, nationalization under a color is a violation of the law of nations and a violation of existing public policy of Congress. As a case of reference, see Hilton versus Guyot. That's Hilton versus Guyot, Guyot, 159 U.S. 113, and that's a case of 1895. Now the gold coin that was confiscated, and they disguised it under alleged nationalized, was later used to purchase voting stockholder shares in the bank and the fund at $35 per ounce. At this point in time, fair market value. Now, a willing seller and buyer without compulsion lost any substantive meaning or substantial meaning. Now, moreover, all of the governors of the several states of the Union who were summoned to and were in Washington, District of Columbus, during the several days of this pre-planned economic fake emergency, the first phase of which was to nationalize under a color of law and to expropriate the people's money, i.e. to steal their gold coin on deposit in the bank. All this must be put in context that all of these persons are actually deputy knights for the Pope of Rome under their doctrine of discovery, and by virtue of them abrogating the gold clause, this also abrogated their obligations to the Treaty of Peace and Friendship superseding the Constitution, and of course would give them colorable grounds on maintaining the institutionalization of forced servitude and peonage, which is connotatively referred to as slavery, i.e. being a 14th Amendment person, corpse, converted to the living dead, etc. And this is where, through color of law, in 1868, they set forth the equality of person to the corpse for the corporation. And of course, they registered all conquered people, particularly people of Asiatic African descent, as Constantinian or quote-unquote Christian hegemony property under the 14th Amendment, registered in their corporate state venue of Delaware, etc. Now, keep in mind, they expropriated the people's money and their gold coins on deposit in the banks. So they stole the people's finances right from the banks. And keep in mind, one of the things that's harmonic with that action then is also harmonic with some of the political actions that they're committing against the people in these days, and that's called House Joint Resolution 2847. And do some research on that, too, because that's a misrepresentation, too, where they're also plotting, planning, and have been expropriating the people's deposit boxes and anything of value from the people, including stealing their funds, etc., to give some satisfaction to their private for-profit exercises in frauds in their interchanges with other countries and other persons, etc., i.e. the alleged debts that they've created under the frauds, and are in fact trying to convert them on the people when actually their private for-profit debts distinguished from any true national debt. That must be very clear to everyone in order to have a proper concept of how to look at things when we're dealing with any operations dealing with the criminals that have taken over the United States Republic government and instilled their private for-profit U.S. democracy order under their doctrine of discovery, which is in fact what's going on. And it cannot be emphasized enough that when one is not aware of that fact, one has absolutely misconceptions as to what's going on. And so that must be cured from an informational perspective to all the people when we're analyzing any interchanges made with these organized criminals that are entrenched within offices that do not exist, that they're claiming have legitimate authority of operations. And this is, again, why it's important for people to study House Joint Resolution 192, 48 Statute 112, and also the Clearfield Doctrine of 1942, so that the concepts of how to look at these operations committed by them should be more clear in the minds of people, and that people do not make the mistake of calling such persons officers or officials, both of which they are not. And of course, when persons, natural persons, who are heirs to the estates, refer to these operatives as officer, they are inadvertently, by oral trust, giving them that position at that moment. And of course, knowing that the people are not aware of the corruption that's going on, they accept the offer of officer offered by the people and exercise powers not vested in them, and are absolutely operating under a color. Now, keep in mind that all of the governors, which are CEO of the several corporate states of the Union, who were summoned to and were in Washington, District of Columbia Territory area during the several days. And keep in mind that Washington, District of Columbia, is a separate sovereign state that they created for their personal selves, separate from the legitimate United States, in order to maintain and to exercise their corruption, to enforce the secret treaty of Verona, etc., and their doctrine of discovery, which is their guide, operatives, and manuals for operation of public policy. That must be understood at all times, and we must, unfortunately, remind ourselves of that continuously, because we have a tendency to forget that. Excuse me. Also, keep in mind, that pre-planned emergency, etc., relative to the gold coin going deposited on the banks, pledged the full faith and credit thereof, and to the aid of the national government, which they secretly overthrew, and formed various socialist committees, such as the Council of State Governments, quote unquote, Council of State Governments. And so, as you can see, even the governors of the states conspire and get together to misgovern the people. This must be understood. This is why they bury or distort any due process operations in the quote-unquote so-called states of agencies when people are seeking remedy or seeking due process to claim right of a state and maturity in their operations outside of the minority dead status of non-descendability that was created by them under a color of law and a color of operation. Also keep in mind that the Social Security Administration, along with the Council of State Governments, etc., purportedly was set forth to deal with the economic quote-unquote emergency. And the Council of State Governments has been absorbed to such things as the National Conference of Commissioners of or on Uniform State Laws. Keep that in mind. The National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws, whose headquarters is located in Chicago, Illinois. And all of those persons being members of the Barristers Association of England as deputy knights under the Pope of Rome, enforcing the doctrine of discovery. This must be at all times kept to the front of your consciousness, because we continue to give in our minds sometimes to these people a consideration of legitimacy that did not reside or rest with them, does not reside or rest, and will not reside or rest with them. For they are enemies of the people, and their major mission is to overthrow the republic constitutional principles which secure the rights of the people. This is the basis of all processes constructed by them when people interface with them, where it always costs the people, and they have no free access to the alleged courts, because they're not courts, they're private human trafficking tribunals. That must be understood. That's not mere opinion. Now, also, the members of the Barristers Association are operating under a different constitution and bylaws, far distant from the depositories of the public record. And it is in this organization that has promulgated, lobbied for, artificially and under colored law passed, colorably adjudicated, and colorably ordered the implementation and the execution of their private purported uniform and model acts and pretended statutory provisions in order to help implement international treaties of the United States Corporation and Company or world uniformity would be desirable. And so they just adjust things to their benefit at all times. This is another reason why when people become somewhat conscious of some of these things that are going on, as an example in the Uniform Commercial Codes, while they switch things around in order to make the playing field uneven again, etc., because they are absolutely operating in total dishonor and total misprision of treason. Now, they would, in relationship to their operations, their uniformity that they set forth, that would be around 1990-91, and the reference book would be NCC-USL. And these organizations operate under the Declaration of Interdependence, set forth on January the 22nd of 1937, and published for their activities in the Book of the States, quote unquote, the Book of the States. This is what they're operating on, under a color. So never think at all that these persons dealing in these subordinate agencies of the states of corporate entities, never think that they're not aware that they're operating under, quote unquote, the Book of the States, which is contrary to the interest of the people, contrary to the Republican form of government set forth at Article 4, Section 4 of the American Constitution, etc., and where they, in their supremacy clause, are held in check at Article 6 of the American Constitution. And so actually, they have a secret oath on their Book of the States. And the 1937 edition openly declares that the people engaged in such activities as farming, husbandry, industry, and reduced to mere, quote-unquote, feudal tenants on the land they supposedly own. And this is the basis upon which they have been operating their fakery of abandonment with foreclosures, etc., and other methods of robbing the people, because they first approached the people with a misclassification of the people's position in the first instance, when the people are moving in their activities on the nature of ownership, when actually they've been listed in the Book of the States as feudal tenants, quote unquote, feudal tenants. And so people need to be aware of these things so they can understand the arrogant, hubristic displayed by so-called public officials and also by private highwaymen calling themselves policemen who are really members of the gangs of New York, have been working for the medical industry and for the corporations and going around murdering young males for their organs, etc., and getting kickbacks, and at the same time giving the general appearance to the public that they're legitimate officers when in fact they are not, and in fact they know exactly what they're doing, and in fact so do the others that don't commit those crimes also are aware of those things even if they don't participate. This is another reason why many of the Asiatics and Puerto Rican brothers and sisters that may be on those forces have a tendency to develop drinking problems and other issues to cover up the harsh and inhumane experiences and knowledge that they obtain just by operating around those foreign Europeans who are occupying the land, who, you must be reminded, are not Americans. Do not call them Americans. They are not. They're foreign Europeans, and their contract enforcers are members of the gangs of New York in agreement under the book of the states to spread their gangs across the land and rob the people. And the Department of Motor Vehicles is part of that network for robbery and for converting the people's natural and divine unalienable rights into crimes. This is what you call your human trafficking courts, but they'll just call them traffic courts. They're actually human trafficking tribunals or auction blocks. That must be understood, comprehended, and it is fact. When the people begin to see things for what they are and not what they are mistaught that these entities or persons are, logically, they would come to certain intellectual and informational levels of understanding and comprehension that they will be more competent to address the problems that they suffer under European colonial piracy and admiralty operations of booty and prize under admiralty law of the seas brought upon the land under the book of the states, ETC 37 edition, where they have declared the people feudal tenants on their own land. Keep that in mind. And also, on the day of 25 of April, 1938, the Supreme Court overturned the standing precedents of the prior 150 years concerning, quote-unquote, the common law established via the Constitution in relationship to the federal government. So this is, again, their activities of actually undermining the republic while at the same time taking oath to support the American Constitution. And so what you have is clear breach of trust, clear breach of contract, and clear and conscious acts of misprision of treason consciously. But they're aware that most of the people, common people who have been miseducated in the school system set forth by Rockefeller with the General Education Board set forth in 1902, that they are docile, they lack the Etyman degree on a third grade level, and for the most part, they can pronounce words but cannot read at the same instance. And this is where their connotative linguistics plays its role amongst the people for deceptive purposes and the theft of their unalienable rights. And that is divine rights that cannot be transferred or sold to another. And so with their operations under the book of the states, quote unquote, there is no federal common law. And the U.S. Congress, in their compromissive state, and who have actually transferred the powers to the Board of Governors of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, has no power to declare substantive rules of common law which are applicable in a legitimate state, whether they be local or general in their nature. or be there commercial law, or as part of the law of torts. And that is where they've been using, which most scholars know, which is the Erie Railroad Company versus Tompkins case, 304 U.S. 64, 82nd legal edition, set at 1188. And so the people must recognize and realize that the common law, quote unquote, is the fountain and source of the securing of substantive rights and of remedial rights, if not our very liberty. Now, the members of the Barristers Association, being deputy knights to enforce the doctrine of discovery, therefore and thereafter formed for themselves private secret committees and granted for themselves special privileges, special immunities, and special franchises, and held secret meetings concerning the judicial procedures, and further amended laws so as to conform to a trend of artificial judicial decisions or to accomplish similar objectives under a color of operation, including hodgepodging the jurisdictions of law and equity together, which is known today as, quote unquote, one form of action, quote unquote, where they hodgepodge the jurisdictions of law and equity together. They know this, or they present this as, quote unquote, one form of action. That was not by accident, but by a carefully conceived conspiracy and plan to subvert the Republican form of government set forth at Article 4, Section 4, and therefore by statutory operations actually put the people under feudal law, subvert and overthrow the Republic, and maintain their secret Treaty of Verona agreement between the Queen of England and the Vatican, and enforce the doctrine of discovery. Now, unfortunately, for many people who are not aware of the real history, they have a tendency to refer to the operations of the doctrine of discovery or the effects of them as, quote unquote, white supremacy, which is a political social engineering misnomer. Keep in mind the operative action is the doctrine of discovery, etc. And so they set those committees for themselves to see to it that these operations were veiled within all of their colorable legislation. Now, the enumerated, specified, and distinct jurisdictions established by the ordained Constitution of 1787, keep in mind the American Constitution of 1787, keep in mind the Ordinance of 1787, keep in mind the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1786, 1787, 1836, etc., and set at Article 3, Section 2, and under the Bill of Rights of 1791, set forth at Amendment 7, were further hodgepodged and fundamentally changed in 1982 to include admiralty jurisdiction. So keep this in mind. Amendment 7 and the Bill of Rights were further hodgepodged and fundamentally changed in 1982 to include admiralty jurisdiction, which was once again brought inland. So for the moment here on Moabite Oasis and on our great and informative venue, High Frequency Radio, we're going to take a break. And I also want to give greetings to all of the hosts on High Frequency Radio. You all are doing a good job, and I know the people appreciate it. So let's take a break, you all. High Frequency Radio, you all.
You're listening to Moabite Oasis with your host, Taj Tarik Bey, exclusively on High Frequency Radio Network, the baddest radio network on the planet.
High Frequency Radio. Sync up. Sync up. Sync up. Sync up. Sync up.
You're listening to Reawakening Minds with your host, Dr. Naila Gilliam, exclusively on High Frequency Radio Network, the baddest radio network on the planet.
Doing this thing all the way live.
High Frequency Radio.
Do you want to expand your conscious thinking to become a better individual? Learn more about public and private, filing a UCC? Or do you simply want to become a healthier version of yourself? Visit our website at radiohighfrequency.com. Click on the store link for products, webinars, services, and more. You never know what jewels you might find. So just visit our website, radiohighfrequency.com. Click on the store link.
This is Dr. Naila Bakari Gilliam, host of Reawakening Minds, heard Mondays 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on High Frequency Radio Network, inviting you to join me and my guests for lively topics of discussion ranging from the practical to the metaphysical and all things in between. I invite you to call in, log on, or simply listen as your mind is stimulated, your consciousness is expanded, and you are introduced to the limitless possibilities and realities of the universe. I am here for you, and my mission is to reawaken minds one mind at a time. Are you awake yet?
Hello, folks. This is Dave McDowell coming to you from the great state of Texas and High Frequency Radio. I want to thank each and every one of the listeners that come out and listen to my show. And I want to say that I'm on every Wednesday from 12 to 2 Central Standard Time. And I look for each and every one of you to show up. I appreciate all the callers that call in, and I hope I can answer all your questions. Until then, have a great day.
Do you need help with a court case, filing your UCC, authentication of your birth certificate, creating a trust, drawing up a business plan and goals, or do you simply have questions? High Frequency is here to help with an array of dedicated scholars. We value our professionalism, and we understand how important it is to come through for our listeners. Do you need to schedule a private consultation? Visit our website, radiohighfrequency.com. Click on the Donations tab. Schedule your consultation with one of our ministry members, Yusuf, Jonah Bey, Isa, Dave McDowell, or QLE. Just visit our website, radiohighfrequency.com. Click on the Donations tab. Select your ministry member, and your consultation will be scheduled. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to email us at info@radiohighfrequency.com. So schedule your consultation today.
Doing this thing all the way live.
High Frequency Radio. You're listening to Mobile Oasis with your host, Taj Tarik Bey, exclusively on High Frequency Radio Network, the baddest radio network on the planet.
It's on. We're back. So keep in mind that the operations of the barristers, they made those fundamental changes which we had mentioned as they were necessary to effect the unification of civil and admiralty procedures. Keep that in mind. The operations before mentioned were fundamental to the changes necessary for them to operate in their corruption to effect unification of civil and admiralty procedures. And so just as the 1938 rules set forth by them under colorable operations abolished the distinction between actions at law and suits in equity, this change would abolish the distinction between civil actions and suits in admiralty. And for reference, you can see Federal Rules of Civil Procedures, 1982, edition, page 17. Also see Federalist Papers, number 83, and the Declaration of Resolves of the First Continental Congress of October the 14th of 1774, the Declaration of Cause and Necessity of Taking Up Arms, July the 6th of 1775, with the Declaration of Independence of July the 4th of 1776, and in reference as a case, Bennett versus Butterworth, 52 U.S. 669. That's Bennett versus Butterworth. Bennett, B-E-N-N-E-T, versus Butterworth, B-U-T-T-E-R-W-O-R-T-H. And so the operatives of the compromised United States private corporation company, distinguished from the legitimate government, thereafter entered the Second World War, during which time the quote-unquote League of Nations was reinstituted under a pretense of the United Nations, and that's set at 22 U.S.C. 287 at Sequoia. And the Bank for International Settlements, quote-unquote, was reinstituted under color and under pretense of the Bretton Woods Agreement. That's Bretton Woods Agreement, B-R-E-T-T-O-N-W-O-O-D-S Agreement. That was set forth at 22 U.S.C. 286 at Sequoia as the International Monetary Fund, quote-unquote, which is loosely commonly referred to as the Fund, and as the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, referred to as the Bank or the World Bank. Now, the United States Corporation Company, as a private for-profit corporate body politic or artificial, came out of World War II and was in worse economic condition than it was when it entered, and the conspirators operating under a color of authority in 1950 declared bankruptcy and reorganization. And that reorganization is located in Title V of the United States Codes annotated. Now, the explanation used by them at the beginning of Title V USCA is most informative, reading, quote unquote, the Secretary of the Treasury was appointed as the receiver in bankruptcy. And so see the reorganization plan number 26, 5 USCA 903, Public Law 94-564, dealing with the legislative history, set at page 5967 for the scholars who would want to do some cross-reference and some research into that matter. Now, the United States, keep in mind when we're talking about the United States now, we're talking about a private for-profit corporate entity distinguished from the legitimate republic which they overthrew. So the United States went down the road and periodically filed for further reorganizations. That's plural. Things and situations worsened, and having done what they were commanded not to do, see Madison's note, Constitutional Convention of August the 16th, 1787, that's in the Federalist Papers, set at number 44. And in 1965, they crowned their continuous fraudulent activities with the colorable passage of the Coinage Act of 1965. Keep in mind, the Coinage Act of 1965. And via that colorable action, they completely debased the constitutional coinage, coin of gold and silver, i.e. the dollar. And you can see that at 18 U.S.C. 331 and 332. And in the case of U.S. versus Marigold, 50 U.S. 560, 13, L edition, legal edition 257. That's Marigold, M-A-R-I-G-O-L-D versus, that's 50 U.S. Now, at the signing of the Coinage Act of July the 23rd of 1965, the operative agent for the doctrine of discovery, whose name is Lyndon Baines Johnson, stated in his press release that when I have signed this bill before me, we will have made the first fundamental change in our coinage in 173 years. Now, the Coinage Act of 1965 supersedes the Act of 1792. So keep in mind, look at the conflict, the absolute conflict of law. Now, the lawful act dealing with the coinage for the United States of Republic, set forth at 1792, was secretly and deceptively and under colorable operation superseded by the Coinage Act of 1965. And that colorable act had the title and act establishing a mint and regulating the coinage of the United States. Keep in mind, they're talking about a private corporation entity, not the legitimate government, but they're faking and exercising as if they're legitimate government. That must be always kept in mind. Now, it's important to take cognizance of the fact that no constitutional amendment was ever obtained to fundamentally change, to amend, to abridge, or to abolish the constitutional mandates, provisions, or prohibitions. But due to the breach of trust, to internal and external diversions surrounding the Vietnam War, etc., the usurpation committed by them and the breaches went unchallenged and unnoticed by the general public at large, who had become a wealthy man's cannon fodder or cheap source of slave labor. And so, as we've talked about on many different instances, you will find that in Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars on pages 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 13, and 56. And, of course, that's Executive Order 11490, King Alfred Plan, and the Rex 84 Plan. Now, the colorable operators of the private for-profit Congress was clearly delegated the power and authority to regulate and maintain the true and inherited value of the coin within the scope and purview of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5, and Clause 6, and Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the ordained Constitution of 1787. And furthermore, a corresponding duty and obligation to maintain the said gold and silver coin and foreign coin at and within the necessary and proper equal weights and measures clause. See also the Bible, Deuteronomy, chapters 25, verses 13 through 16, Proverbs, chapter 16, verses 11, and that relates in Public Law 97-289. Now, those who are exercising the offices of the several states in equal measure know that such de facto transactions were unlawful and unauthorized. But through their colorable actions and compromissions and breaches of trust and breaches of their offices and breaches of their official oaths, sanctioned, implemented, and enforced the complete debauchement and the resulting governmental, social, industrial, economic change in the de jure states and in the United States of America, and were and are now under the delusion that they can do both directly and indirectly what they were absolutely prohibited from doing. And as a case for reference, look at Craig versus Missouri, 4 Peters 903. That's Craig versus Missouri, C-R-A-I-G versus Missouri, and Peters 903, P-E-T-E-R-S. Now, for those of you, scholars, etc., and those who do cross-reference research, working to bring remedy to ourselves and to the people, you can confirm the whole affair by taking a look at 12 U.S.C. 95A and 95B. And in addition, the various reorganization acts listed in Title V of the United States Code. And there you are your legal public records and historical proofs. And now we're going to bear the former congressman, or hear from the former congressman who, surprised, ended up indicted and in federal prison while more brazen felons continue to run the Congress. And that is the basis upon which why they set up James Trafficking of Ohio in reference to House Joint Resolution 192, etc., when he said that we are now in Chapter 11 and members of Congress are trustees presiding over the greatest reorganization of any bankrupt entity in world history, the U.S. government. And so as you can see, Trafficking was addressing what was going on, and of course he was not in harmony with the other compromised and corrupt congressmen. This is why they set him up. And put him in prison. And this is also why he lost his life under suspicious circumstances on his farm that he's been doing for years in this past September. And I think anybody with reasoning mind can understand, because he's been exposing much information to the people in relationship to the legitimacy of government and the illegitimacy of the operations of persons claiming to be government. He became a threat to the order of the barristers of England and their doctrine of discovery operations, etc. And so he also had stated, it is an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act of March the 9th, 1933, 48 Statute 1, Public Law 89-719, and declared by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt being bankrupt and insolvent. That's House Joint Resolutions 192, 73rd Congress, in session, June the 5th of 1933.
Excuse me, Taj.
Yes.
We have a call. You want to take some calls? Take a call?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, do you want to take a call?
Yes,
got a long distance. All right, let me see if I can get, if he's still here. Brother Delroy, you're on High Frequency Radio.
Yeah, Islam, part of the Islam, National Grand Sheikh.
Islam, good brother. How you doing, Delroy?
I'm good. I just want to send my condolences out to the family of Walter Smith. You're killing it. You're killing it, National Grand Sheikh. You are killing it. I have something I wanted to add to just back up what you're saying. But our people have got to really get this, because this mass genocide that these so-called officers and priests are committing, we've got to stop it. We've got to do something, because this is just, it's insane. It's absolute insanity. This cannot continue. I just want to say something about the court system, and just back up this public and private. When you finish National Grand Sheikh, it's going to take me a little bit, but it's worth just explaining. Every time I go up against these people, I want to explain who they really are, and I'm just going to do some historical references and these black priests and who they actually are and what magic in they're practicing, because our people have got to get this hang of what they're actually really going on in these so-called municipal Roman venues that are not courts. So I'll let you finish what you're saying, and I want to quote some statutes that I want people to look into, because our people have really, especially across the sea over there, have really got to get moving, because this mass genocide, ritual abuse of our people, it's got to stop.
Yes, go ahead. Share some with us.
Okay, I'm going to go to in particular, I want to just talk about the trust. And it all starts, strangely enough, from our country over here in the UK, and then they took this doctrine through the bulla, which I've sent you, a papal bull, Inter Cantera, through Unum Sanctum, and through the Roman Curia, which is the most important one. I'm just going to pull this one up. Let me find it here, because it's just here.
Yes.
The Roman Curia, it's called, and this is what it's called. It's actually called the Holy Office of Inquisition. All right, it's created in the 16th century and reforms the need for the Catholic Church during the time of crisis. The popes began to create various, I can't even pronounce this, series to respond to the needs of the Holy Office of the Inquisition. And it's through these papal bulls when the Roman Curia was created on January the 22nd, 1588. And every corporation on this planet is under that Curia. And that's this doctrine discovery that you're talking about. So I want people to look at and I'm going to kick the papal bull. It's Immensa Eterni Dei, and it's from 1588. I want people to look up that papal bull, because all the injury and harm that's being caused is from this doctrine from that papal bull under the priests have got. So that's the important papal bull I want people to look at, because that deals with the Council of Trent. It deals with the Council of Nicaea, which I probably want you to jump on as well. But I also wanted to say this as well, National Grand Sheikh. In particular, I want to make reference also to the Roman bar guilds that you have talked about in particular. And I'm just going to pull this document up, because I just want to read part of it. And I've got it here, just a second. Right. A Roman court is a forum for exclusive private business of law bar guild, and that's the British Accreditation Registry. That's what the bar stands for. Guild sanctioned by the Roman cult, also known as the Vatican, in which members of the guild presume certain roles on behalf of the government. Public and private don't mix.
Yes.
We're appearing as government and not. Can I keep going? Do you want to comment, National Gunsheik, or do you want me to keep going?
And that is well, and everyone should pay attention and take notes on what Brother Delroy is sharing, because once you do research, you will see they're actually telling you what they've done. And again, this is further proof that we should not be naive about what is operating here, and should not be arguing racism or white supremacy, but they're actually dealing with the doctrine of discovery. Continue.
Yeah, practicing eugenics. Absolutely, it's about the blood, and they know it's about the blood, and they know how the controllers, law of vibration, correspondence. They know exactly what black priests. I'm going to get into that in a second. So, in make profit for the guild and its members through the direct asset seizure and the commercialization of various securities, bonds, and bailments. The meaning and the source of the word court in respect of Roman court is derived from the Latin word corteo, meaning securities, bond, and bailments, as the private commercial business of the ancient cult of Rome sanctioned law guilds in the 13th century. And that started over in this country over here before it got over to the States when they started doing the Inquisition and the doctrine of discovery. So, in order to make a guild money called guilt or guilty, the private bar normally oversee a unique hidden trust, Clearfield doctrine. I've already mentioned this. For each controversy or suit that comes into the private Roman court, any bonds that are generated called guilt bonds are connected to the hidden trust, which the private bar guild members are sworn to deny ever exists. I'll stop there, let it come. I've got a bit more, but I'll stop there for a second if you want to add anything, National Glands-Taj.
Yeah, that is good, because it's very clear that not only are they aware of what they are doing is criminal, but they have been not disclosing their operations in the corporate states of what they're actually doing with the people, whether dealing with the marriage certificates, the birth certificates, or any other instruments, and that even with those instruments, they're even, again, superseding any lawful judicial activities when the people try to make claim of right on their estate, that they still subvert them. Agreed.
And another thing I want people to look at, and I don't know if Glands-Taj mentioned it today, but he has briefed us, is the Cestui Trust Act of 1666. It was made in this country over here in the United Kingdom, but it applies over there because this doctrine of discovery through this country over there is they're still paying taxes to England to this day. I think you mentioned it, for the Queen of England and the split with the Jesuits, and that was done recently at the East Gate. It was done not so long ago, and they doing big rituals on it last weekend. They was doing East at East Gate. They did it last weekend when all the taxes are paid to the Rome through the Queen of England, through the City of London Corporation, and the Jesuits get their cut from the Queen. And so the taxes that you're paying are not even going to the U.S. government. They're not going there at all whatsoever. They're coming straight to here, and the Jesuits are picking it up through the Federal Reserve. So I'm going to just get into this now, so people have got very clear understanding that taxes it's involuntary servitude. We shouldn't be paying taxes. It's slavery.
Yes. And keep in mind, and this is where people need to never forget that the U.S. corporation company is a colony of the U.K.
Yes, correct, absolutely. And I'll just to say this: the Cestui Trust, also known as a term of life, or pure atare, or foreign commissionary citus trust, secret trust, is a pseudo form of trust first formed in the 16th century in England by Henry VIII, in order to presume, including but not limited to, one or more person presumed wards, infants, idiots, lost or abandoned at sea, and therefore presumed and assumed dead after 7 years. additional presumptions by which such a trust may be legally formed were added in later statutes. So that's what they did. They've been declared as dead. They're supposed to get rid of the trust after 120 days, for what I've looked into, but they don't do that. They keep continuing it onwards and then use the people as chattel under the codes, 1724 under the Black Bible codes, and they're still doing that to this day.
Exactly. And people need to be aware of that. Yeah, appreciate that. Appreciate you sharing that with us, Brother Delroy. Thank you.
Thank you, National Grand Sheik. Can I just put one more thing? Is that okay?
Yeah, do share that with us, yes.
Yeah. All right. Just as you were saying, I want to just say this in particular to our people across the water. You've been giving references, so I'll do some references as well for people across in the States over there. And I'm just going to say, I think it's in the United States, it's the Act of Settlement 1662, the District of Columbia Act 1871, and 1941 Land Lease Act, and they also claim the Citus Trust and claim it as property of the soul, ecclesiastical rights which migrate to the United States for administration, and that's why it's done with the Patriot Act 2001 and the Emergency Powers Act 1861. So it's been going on. They've been at this for a very long time, and we need to wake people up. You're the floor there. There's so much more I could say, National Grand Sheik. It is. Oh, last thing. Just to back up what I was saying regarding with what you were mentioning about being a colony, just to back up. From 1917-18, the enactment of the Sedation Act and Trading with the Enemy Act in the United States and through the United Kingdom, the citizens of the Commonwealth and the United States became effectively enemies of the state and aliens, which in turn convert into the Commissioner of Private Trust as secret trust for private international trust, and that was done by the Vatican. So it's done right through this country, right into your country. That's absolute fact. I yield the floor, National Grand Sheik.
Thank you, good brother. Much appreciated, man. Thank you, Brother Delroy. And as you all can see, and we're grateful, we're brothers on the other side of the water, sharing information with us to raise the consciousness of the people. And so keep in mind that people around the world are paying attention to what's going on here. Never doubt that. And our concepts about what's really going on in our relationship to these people who are claiming to be government, but in fact are not, should be very, very, very clear. And again, I want to thank Brother Delroy for sharing that information. And always take notes and go to your archives and review the information and do some research. And I'm sure it will better serve us in our processes of restoration and reclamation of our lost estate, etc. Now, keep in mind that that trafficking, when he made a reference to this corruption that exists within the governing body, who are now understand de facto and not de jure. He said it's an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act of March the 9th in 1933, 48 Statute 1, Public Law 89-719, and declared by President Roosevelt being bankrupt and insolvent, House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session June the 5th of 1933, and that's the joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and to abrogate the gold clause, which dissolved the sovereign authority of the United States and the official capacities of all United States governmental officers, and departments, and is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. So it's very clear by the congressional records that these people are aware that they are imposters pretending to be government when in fact the government was overthrown by them and dissolved via execution in bankruptcy. And in fact, their exercise of authority is their doctrine of discovery, and logically, the Christian Black Codes of 1724. This is also why it's necessary for them to misrepresent humanity and to create the corpse or the 14th Amendment artificial person to give it an ens legis statutory life and to classify or misclassify humans within that category in order to regulate chattel property under the guise of being just or honorable in human relations, when in fact everything that they do is absolutely contrary to justice, contrary to humanity's interest, contrary to the republic form of government established by the American Constitution, contrary to anything legitimate in human society, but in fact is a genocidal pact set forth under the Spanish Inquisition against the Moors and Yahudi, reinforced by the secret Treaty of Verona, carried in agreement by the manual known as the Doctrine of Discovery, etc., and of course registered under the 14th Amendment corpse entity of 1868 after they closed the Freedmen's Bureau.
Taj, we have another question if you're open for that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, how you doing? Peace, Islam, Taj. This is Makana. Makana, I'm calling from Corporate, Connecticut. My question is, I heard you speak about the Pope's denouncing of the doctrine of discovery.
Yes.
I was confused because I was wondering why would he do that? It seemed like that would undermine his whole agenda and the Roman Empire's whole agenda.
That is really good that you're saying that and bringing that up. And the major reason we say that, because keep in mind, many people have not been aware that the basis of the authority that these Europeans have been operating under is the doctrine of discovery. And most of the time, the people are arguing constitutional and treaty issues. You see the point to which they are obligated, and would wonder why, after abridging the rights of the people, they will continue to act with authority. And this is because, by conspiracy, they know, just like the policemen, contracting forces for the corporations and insurance companies would murder people on the streets, and of course the hospitals under the black code would steal their organs and sell them to other hospitals, and also take the pineal gland out of the brain, and they would save that for their elite, etc., for one of the most expensive drugs on the planet, where they eat the pineal gland. But keep in mind,
diabolical.
Yes, but that's what's been going on. And so, again, the people need to be more aware of what's actually going on, and not that we should not look at some methodologies or processes, but we should look at our relationship differently than we generally have, with the naive perspective that the people usually have a tendency to approach these matters with, in relationship to, trying to go through some legal processes and not understanding the total venue that these people are operating on. It does not dismiss the different processes that the people may use, not at all. It is just that the people need to be aware of what's been actually against them and understand that these people are totally conscious of what they're doing. That goes for all the barristers, all the so-called, and you understand they're imposters, so-called judges, and they're imposters, right. The so-called governors, they're imposters, the so-called lawyers and attorneys, and they're imposters, and the so-called agencies, etc., and they're imposters, the so-called federal operative government, etc., and they're imposters, the so-called states and the so-called municipal government operatives. They are all secret deputy knights for the popes of Rome. This is why the injuries have been so solidly executed against the people. And this is the basis of those concentration camps that they've been calling private prisons.
So that's why no matter how disgusting it may be in the U.S. corporation and all the things that's going on, people getting murdered in the street for no reason, it never seems to change anything, or it never seems to.
Exactly. Because real deal, it is a reason. See, this is the reason. See, this is what people have to understand. The reason is, number one, they're carrying out their genocide against the heirs of the state, of the estate. Are we clear? Number two, that gives them access to organs. That's usually why they will attack young males, etc. And it gives them access to the pineal gland. This is also the basis of upon the average of 4 to 10,000 young people being missing under the U.S. corporation jurisdiction every year. They steal the pineal glands, etc., steal the organs, and if you do some research in your major hospitals that do organ transplants, you will see that they're busy 24 hours a day, and that helicopters are constantly delivering organs. Likewise, with the war that they have in Crimea, they found many bodies or corpses with their organs removed. And people need to understand what's really going on, not only here, but on the planet, by these foreign, colorful Europeans operating under the disguise of the U.S. democracy order, faking as government. And so you see they have a greater and broader diabolical plan against humanity, and not just mere operations of admiralty and justice, you see?
Yeah. So it doesn't even make a difference if he denounced it publicly. It's not going to, it won't change any situations here. They're going to still continue to do what they're ordered to do, is basically what he's saying.
This is why the civilized world are now uniting to do their UST bonds, which are actually backed by human trafficking. You see?
Right.
You know, so people need to understand what's taking place on the broader spectrum of international affairs. This is also why China, as an example, set forth that blockade at the Twin Ports in Long Beach, California, and Los Angeles, etc. And the cabal's basic dispensation in the news would be that that's a long slowness strike, when actually it's an embargo.
Wow.
Yes, and so people need to know, and so we need to awaken our people and bring them to a higher level of honor and consciousness amongst ourselves, and unite as the nation that we are, as we have been under occupation by Roman operations under the Spanish Inquisition. That's why it's important for the people to know of their bloodline, that they're Moors, and that the land is Morocco, not to be distinguished, or not to be confused with the corporate United States Corporation Company, which is not a country, but a private occupational corporate entity, i.e. disguised as a country. And I know that you know that many of our people are not aware of that fact. Therefore, their concepts on how they look at things have to be, by default, improper.
Right. Right. And it can be very dangerous.
Yeah. And, you know, ignorance is dangerous. Now, in reference to your mentioning the doctrine of discovery and Pope Francis ending the Christian doctrine of discovery, this also means that you have rogue operatives operating in de facto government that are actually using that or hiding behind the doctrine of discovery to commit these acts. And so, like Brother Paul Savage said, when these things take place, we should be reporting these crimes to the international community, to Interpol, also to the Holy See, etc., as all of these entity operative persons come under the Roman Curia, as Brother Delroy has shared with everyone on High Frequency Radio. So we need to be aware of these things and add this knowledge to our base of information, and logically our concepts on how we approach these things will be adjusted accordingly.
True. Yeah, I understand. Because of controlling your emotion and reporting the crimes to the right officials, if that's what I'm hearing you saying.
Yeah, to the international community, because remember,
right.
the operatives here are actually a rogue operation de facto government. They're not legitimate on
right.
any front. So there will be
They're
no law process through them.
Right.
And it's unfortunate, but it's actually the truth. And this is so that people don't spend a lot of years interchanging with them thinking that they're going to get justice.
Right, when they just trying to get the runaround.
They have another agenda that has been set forth for actually centuries.
True.
So one of the most important things for us to do is to honor our mothers and fathers as a first step to have right of claim to the estate. You see the point?
Mm-hmm. It's clear. You know,
and this
clear.
Is where. Go ahead.
You were saying? Go ahead. No, I'm listening.
And this is where and why, once you understand the real history, and particularly understanding the motive by which they were motivated to shut down the Freedmen's Bureau in 1868 and to set up the courts of the 14th Amendment, you will understand, after understanding the real history, why Noble Drew Ali did what he did in 1913 when he set up the old Canaanite temple for the restoration of the estate of the Moors, who are indeed the true aboriginal Al-Moroccans or Americans of the land, who did not know that they were branded in order to make them non-descendable. And this whereas under international law principles universally, the first rule for the restoration of the people is nationalization.
So all these people in the world that promote these colorable laws, they're quick to call you, you know, you're black, you're yellow, you know, they're quick to say that. They're just
remember
ignorant.
That's the key. Yeah, remember that's
the
key.
agents
Under
themselves.
the 14th Amendment fraud. Keep in mind that purpose is to encourage the people to stay under the 14th Amendment fraud because it makes them not descendable. This is also why they do what you call 501c3 and 501c4 kickbacks to so-called leaders in our community to encourage the people to think they have a benefit by claiming these categories, etc., without telling the truth about what's going on and making them think that they're making a claim of right under the word, under 501c3 agreement, skull and bones. You see the point? When it's actually a kickback for the leader guy to keep the fraud going on. And knowing that the people most of the people are not aware of the real history of operations. They think it's just mere, filings that they have liberated themselves, not understanding that these people are operating under the doctrine of discovery.
That's real high deception.
Go ahead.
That's real high deception. I mean, it's amazing that a person can even come from underneath that, I think, because how would, being born here under this educational system, how would it's impossible for people to even try to begin to try to understand this without some type of guide.
Now, keep in mind, that's why Rockefeller set up the General Board of Education in 1902 to make these people docile. And this is why they use the so-called, quote-unquote, black nigger leader preacher guys who are really working for Constantine, not Jesus, to make their people agree to be 14th Amendment people of color and then convince them that meant Afrocentricity, because they know that most of the people didn't have access to law books and didn't know that color means a semblance, a simulacrum distinguished from that which is real.
So the people born before
people who are active at the same time. Go ahead.
So the people born before they start issuing all these birth certificates and SSI numbers, they had access to a allodial title to their estate.
This is why when you go into the congressional records, now keep in mind, put things in context. Noble Ali, Sheikh Sharif Abdul Ali, set forth and organized the old Canaanite temple in relationship to the true Aboriginal Americans of the land. Al-Moroccans is descendants of Moroccans, true Americans, the copper complexion people. That's why they used to use the dark brown paper bag test or the copper penny test to identify the true American. And then
crazy.
keep in mind that 1913 he set it up for the restoration of the estate. And logically, a person who's not being themselves in law are not descendable. This is where the impropria persona principle comes in, or quote-unquote, being oneself is necessary in any right of claim of rights or liberties or properties, for it relates to status. It deals with the standing, the condition, the capacities, and the incapacities for one to make claims to right on both liberties, estates, persons, and properties, and the enforcement of the common law that was abrogated by the Europeans under their Roman curia operations, etc. And so this is where, when one looks into any law book in relationship to the common law, which has been abrogated by them, you will see that the common law derives its authority. It is based on that archaic or that juristic theory from times immemorial that derives its authority entirely from traditions and customs of archaic immemorial connection. And so this is the basis of which the common law is used. So logically, if these people are hidden of their bloodline, Moors, and they think that they're black coming under the brand system, immediately international law has no protections for them because they themselves are abandoning their claim of right to the estate. This is why a lot of the so-called paid-off 501c3 and 501c3 Negro leaders are put in place to deceive the people, to make them think that they're bringing them remedy without telling them the truth about their bloodline descendancy, and that the brand systems make them non-descendable in law, no matter how good their argument is. This is the nature of the Dred Scott case, which is used all over the world as a measure for principles of rights, capacities, and incapacities in relationship to the status of beings under rules of citizenship and the capacities of rights of claim on both person and property.
So if you're not a part of the original colonists, you're not a part of the said company or colony.
Now, this is where a lot of the European administrators, when you see a lot of the Europeans who have been suffering under the constant dissolution of the so-called middle class, are starting to tell certain truths and expose a lot of information and claiming to be sovereign, but they can't be sovereign unless they go home. You see, because they got to
go back to So they can only be sovereign in Czechostan, whatever, there France and Europe and all that. Yeah.
There you go. And this is why some of the magistrates will say to them after they go through all of this spiel and through all these methodologies, legal processes, UCCs and everything else, and claim sovereign Christian rights and all this stuff, that the magistrates will say to them sometimes, you cannot use the Constitution as a defense, as you are not a party to it. What the magistrate is actually saying is, remember, most of these so-called middle-class Europeans and others got their benefits economically and politically by overthrowing the Republic, House Joint Resolution 192, the coup of 1871, the Congress adjourning sine die, 1861, not disclosing it, and then trying to claim to be Americans when actually they're European colonists. So in order to be sovereign or have any sovereign right, they must be the people of the land. They're occupiers. And see, so again, they've been trying to steal our birthright. They've been trying to claim the sovereign right that only belongs to us. You see? Now, before the Europeans overthrow their elite, which is really what's going on, this is why they want their guns, get the whole point? They'll tell you can't use that Constitution as a defense. Because this is basically what's occurring. The land is Morocco. The Treaty of Peace and Friendship, which supersedes the American Constitution, and keep this in mind when you look at the covenant, because the covenant contract of the Constitution law is in relationship to a nation state what a common will is to a family state. It is identical in its character in law. for it preserves the resources and the rights and the liberties of the progeny of those who are participants in the original signing of treaties and contracts, all of which are treaties, all of which are wills. And so, therefore, for the Europeans to claim a right, they got to be direct descendants of Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and all the other Europeans in harmony with them, known to be in harmony with them, with the original signings, and they must have always respected and worked to preserve the republic that was set forth in that American Constitution. They failed to do so. And keep in mind, George Washington, remind them, was a woman that was at a speech, actually an address that George Washington, who was a general, and he was assigned to Benjamin Franklin's seat as under the plenipotentiary rule set forth because they were ministers plenipotentiary under the setting forth of the Treaty of 1786 with the Moors at Morocco. And so, therefore, this is also why Hillary Clinton spoke from the Thomas Jefferson room after they bombed that embassy in Bengali, etc., with the Moorish flag behind her, to imply to the world that they're not maintaining slavery. Everybody knows that they really are. Anyway, that was from the Thomas Jefferson room. They do not speak publicly from the minister's plenipotentiary room because they got the Moorish flags in there, the real American flag. Once you understand the dynamics of the real history, you can see the kind of quandary they're in right now by trying to still claim rights when actually they are operating in treason because they overthrew the republic. And therefore, some of the magistrates will say to them, you know, you can't use that Constitution as a defense because you're not a party to it. Then they start claiming to the people that this is a U.S. democracy. Then they start teaching that in school. And now that their middle class has been dissolved, all of a sudden they want the republic back, but they want to act like they're the Americans. They're not the Americans. We are. And so they're still trying to steal the birthright. And once you understand that, you know, we can analyze these things for ourselves and our families and better construct writs and arguments in the international community in relationship to our right of claim and our right of status. And in order to make those claim of right to a state, they must be in propria persona to be sui heritis or to be heritable. And this is the reason why the European used the brand systems as a method of colorable operations, because it makes anyone that is not in the honor of their mothers and fathers in law not descendable. And so you see a lot of people trying to use UCCs and other methodologies to claim right of claim, and they are not in their proper person. They can make beautiful arguments, but according to law, unless they're in their proper person, they can't invoke the common law, because that's what trumps the Roman law, the civil law, the canon law, upon which the construction of the dual, or what you call the double stock trust that they set up after they did that coup, and then disallowed any quote-unquote legal person to construct a double stock trust. This is what they've done, and you'll find that in the congressional records. So what has happened is that the Europeans have spent so much time miseducating our people that they lost their birthright. And this is and so our job is to do the best that we can to inform our people and trust that they will be honorable unto themselves and honor their mothers and fathers, that their days may be longer upon the earth land which the Lord their God Allah has given them, for they are the heirs to the world's largest estate. But if they're not in honor, they have no right of claim, no matter what instruments they use. And this is also what both the so-called black leader guys who are paid off and their bosses, the European colonial operatives under the U.S. democracy order, have been doing as much as they can to misrepresent, to suppress, and to act like those are terrorist papers or something like that, in order, because it represents that their game is over.
Yeah, Sylvie, I dig it. Sure.
And so we have to express to the rest of the civilized world that we're not aligned with their fraud. This is another reason, because as the civilized world dumps them T-bonds and stop feeding the beast, after a while the shelves at all of these stores like Walmart and all the rest of them, the ship-to-shelf type thing, they're going to recognize why all the Target stores are closing down in Canada, and then they've been shipping the stuff to the different stores in the lower part of North America to make it look like things are all right. It's only a matter of time, because remember, the economic and political commercial paradigm is not warehouses. That's why they've been making condos of warehouses across the country, because they don't store in warehouses. They go from ship to shelf. And it's only a matter of time that these people can't continue to fake it, because what is happening is that the civilized world is not accepting that Jesuit, counterfeit, private, for-profit commercial paper called Federal Reserve notes. And after a while, they can't feed their monster machine, and they can't maintain their doctrine of discovery fraud. And as you see, this pressure is on them now. This has much to do with why Pope Francis was eager to sign that treaty with the ending of the doctrine of discovery that you mentioned earlier. However, we still have rogue operatives, don't we? And then we also have the people still not conscious to any degree that they should be. Also keep in mind the Special Committee of 24 operatively set forth in 1960. And, of course, that comes from the General Assembly of Nations of the Earth in relationship to these people to right to their name and nationality. That's why they've dealt with that issue of the nationality of these people in the Universal Proclamation of Human Rights in 1948, also with the rights of the child in 1959, also treaty enforcement in 1993, also the rights of indigenous people as signed by President Obama for the corporate entity, operatives, etc., all of which commands these people to declare their nationality. And so logically, until the heirs admit or step up, they're considered as abandoning their estate. This is why all claims that they make upon the people and their estates are listed under abandonment.
Wow.
And so as the Special Committee of 24 for the dissolution of all colonial governments has been systematically taking place, the people were supposed to be nationalized in conjunction with it on steps so that the transition can be made. But we don't have to argue the issue, for the evidence is clearly there that the churches and the civic groups and the other organized groups have not been telling the people the truth about real history or their nationality, and therefore the people are out of sequence with what's going on in the civilized world, and they've been held back when actually they should have been taught. And this is why when you look in the rights of indigenous people, it makes reference to this information to obligatorily be dispensed by all governments, all church groups, all civic groups, etc., at all costs. And we don't have to talk about the fact that they will bridge their obligations, because they very, very much have. And you'll find small venues and some larger venues where active Moors are trying to inform the people in accord with their divine right and in accord with the support of the civilized world. But as an overall, you will see that most people have abridged their obligations and their positions of trust in relationship to the people. And so again, on Moabite Oasis and on High Frequency Radio, as you can see, Brother Paul Savage, myself, and others have been doing the best that we can to carry out our obligations to ourselves, to our progeny, to our people, and to the legitimacy of national order, law, order, and governmental principles. At any rate, thanks for calling in. Thanks for listening, you all. This is Tarik Bey, your host for Moabite Oasis, signing off. High Frequency Radio, y'all. High Frequency Radio. High frequency, y'all. High frequency. High frequency, y'all. High frequency. High frequency, y'all. High frequency.
You're listening to Moabite Oasis with your host, Taj Tarik Bey. Exclusively on High Frequency Radio Network, the baddest radio network on the planet.
Frequency Radio. Sync up. Sync up. Sync up.